I like lots of good little thoughts in there I would like to follow up with. Whai Mai, what about you?
My language is my identity. It's my history, and it is the future of my family. So the question is, where do I stand? I would say that I stand in the heart of whatever we're trying to preserve our language. I believe in our language because we grew up in Samoa, and we were brought up with the teaching were based on biblical principles. And it's being said in the teaching that we had is that our language is gifted to us by God. And it is our responsibility, it's our duty to make it alive. And it's a legacy that has been left to us by our ancestors that we need to carry it on and pass it on to our generations. Here in New Zealand, we worked really hard. It wasn't an easy battle for us, and I know that John was part of that battle, that we want our language to survive in New Zealand because it is our history. And it is the future of our children, that through our first language, our children will learn the second language to be successful academically in the society that we're living in. And it is also from our own scholars who is the head of states, Whionga Tupuotam Sisi, and he states that the tragedy of losing a language is not really the words and the expressions, but it's the loss of your soul and also the loss of the histories that which words and expressions record memory and identity. So I really believe in that. We don't preserve our language here in New Zealand, we will lose our souls, we'll lose our histories, because it is our language that's passed on by our ancestors to speak our histories. And who is there to tell the stories to our future generations about our past. And also that a Whionga Aiono, and she said that if there's no language, then there's no culture. And if there's no culture, darkness descends the village. So we don't really want that to happen to our language. We've seen what's happening to the Māori and their language, and we don't really want our younger generation to go through that. We know that through schools, our children have been forever criticised for being underachievers, not achieving at school, and forming that big long tail. And it always goes back to their identity. It always goes back that they're not really, they've lost their identity. They're not really sure of who they are. Without our language, where would we be in this world?
Thank you. Raftai. Carmel, where do you stand?
Just got so much going on in my head.
I know.
I mean, I guess from three different perspectives I could talk about this. As a New Zealand-born Samoan Tongan Pālangi, as a mother, and also as an educator. And I guess all those three things help form the perspective I have as a politician. And I'm one of the New Zealand-born Pacific people that don't have either of my Pacific languages. And often what you get is people saying, you know, you should be ashamed because you can't speak your Pacific language. And the reality is, for many of our New Zealand-born young people, they don't have the opportunity to do so. And quite often, parents make the decision not to teach that language, and that's an unfortunate reality that we're faced with. Having studied under John McCaffrey, actually, and having trained as a teacher. So if we disagree on anything, then I don't know who's wrong, the teacher or the student. But having studied and having, had a particular commitment to Pasifika children in education, I know the importance of it, and I know what it does for their academic achievement, and I know the impact that that has on their English literacy as well. So it is disappointing to see it cut from the Pasifika education strategy, because we know that the evidence suggests that that shouldn't be the case, that actually it should be in there. As a Pacific Caucus with my colleagues Soa William Seo and Charles Cheval and Winnie Laban before she left, and now with Chris Whaafoi, this is something that we've been discussing in quite a lot of detail for the last 2 years. And I've gone to John and Judy actually on a regular basis, or we've had quite a few different meetings just to discuss that. But just what we really thought, this is even before the cuts or before it was taken out of the Pasifika education strategy, is that our Pacific community were waiting for the next level. like ready to take it to the next level. Like, where are we going with our Pasifika languages? What's the next step? Because things were trucking along, but I think that there was an expectation from our Pacific community that we step it up. So that was the conversation. So it was disappointing last year to see the resources cut and to have to go back a step and then now have to make up that ground. You know, we are having that discussion. An interesting discussion we had a couple of weeks ago was actually with our Māori colleagues, and we called in the head of the Māori Language Commission to have a discussion between us as Pacific MPs with our Māori colleagues and with the head of the Māori Language Commission, a discussion with regards to the status of Pacific languages and what might be you know, what might be the track moving forward and how we might engage in that dialogue. Because the reality is that the relationship between Pacific and Māori precedes any other relationship. You know, our relationship with New Zealand came after that. So having that conversation is really important. And that was a really positive conversation, actually, and I can't go into too much detail, but that's where we're at with our thinking at the moment. Let's start talking about what the next step is. Obviously, there's ground to make up now with some of the cuts that have been made. We're concerned about the fact that languages are so endangered. Before we met just now, we were talking about New Zealand's relationship with the Pacific and the inquiry that was undertaken there. And the fact that New Zealand acknowledged in the report that stemmed from that inquiry that the Cook Islands, Niue and Tokelau deserve the same level of education and health as what any other New Zealander has access to. Now, if that's the case, I guess we can take it one step further also and say that they also deserve the same emphasis with regards to language preservation and retention. So those are the discussions I think that we need to have as a Pacific community, as a country as well. And I guess the final thing is that what continues to astound me is the fact that we place no value as New Zealanders on our own space and our own culture and what is part of this Pacific space and you know, world that we live in. Still in our New Zealand curriculum at Year 13, we have you know, our Year 13 students learning about Queen Victoria back in the 18th century or whenever she lived. I failed history in 7th form, so I can't remember. And still, you know, we place an emphasis on languages like Latin, German, French, Mandarin, Japanese, and still we don't teach our kids about pre-colonial history of New Zealand, let alone the Pacific. And if we're not placing that value on those things, then as a country we're in serious trouble, because that means that we don't value our culture and we don't value our people, and we're raising children that don't value where they come from as well. So I think those are some of the questions that we need to be asking. Those are some of the discussions that we need to be having in regards to our Pacific languages.
Right, thank you. Well, I know you've been furiously writing little notes there, John. That's to add to the big notes you already had to start off with. Where do you see, or where do you stand in terms of the preservation of our Pacific languages?
Well, tēnā tātou katoa, te ao whānui. Tēnā hoki koe, Sandra, mihi mai nei, karangatu nei kia mātou ki te hara mai nei I tēnei rā. Tuatahi te mihi atu ki te tangata whenua, nā rātou I whakatakoto te kaupapa nei, o tā rātou tonga o te reo Māori, kei te tautoko mātou ki te reo Māori, te reo tuatahi o tō tātou whenua. Mālau molelei, mālau tau mahu he ewhiawhi, koe tau mua o e talanoa, koe mahu wingo o lea ki he tau whānau, whāmili mō community. Taloha ni, kia orana, kia manuia, te pū, te haka ki pū, talangi ki lunga ki hifo, ke pū I le lalo whenua, whakalofa lahi atu, kia mo tolu wasi. And talofa lava, lau sisunga, lau awhionga, mā lau soifua, mā le langi a mamā, o te whātalofa atu I a te outou, I le nei awhi, mā le loto whia tele, o nā le mataupu tāua, o tātou whātasi, o le ngangana e lua. Ia manue lo tātou whanutanga. So greetings to people. I think the thing is that it's not so much what I think about it as an individual, but as a researcher, I'm very interested in the issue about discussing the importance of language and the likely positive effects that learning through your own language or through your heritage language is going to have for academic achievement. So I know that there are big issues of language maintenance, but to me, the big issue is to move away from a narrow focus just on maintenance tonight and talk about how we can use the knowledge that we've got from bilingual education to raise Pacific children's academic achievement. And that, to me, is an issue I'd like to put on the table. The second one is, I think that the research on constitutional and legal relationships that have been referred to by Carmel and others are really important. You know, we really need Mei Chen here tonight to inform us about that. But I'm really confident that the evidence and the research that's emerging will show that New Zealand has a quite unique relationship with the Pacific, with Pacific peoples, and that's a long-standing historical relationship. That means that New Zealand must face up to its responsibilities to the Pacific, to Pacific people, and to Pacific families. And thirdly, I'm a parent and a grandparent of children of Tongan, Samoan, Cook Island, Irish and Scottish ancestry. So I've obviously got a view with my family about the position of Pacific languages in New Zealand, and our hope is that our grandchildren will have the opportunity to use those languages for academic learning, because we're determined that they're not going to be part of that tail. Okay? So there's a personal issue there as well. I think the thing is that bilingual education, that is, if it's well organised and if it's used so that the languages of our families and our children are used for academic learning, has the ability to raise children's overall achievement in school. It has the ability to produce Pacific children who would score higher in English and English literacy than children in the surrounding schools where those programs are not used. And so it would meet all three of the criteria that the whānau was trying to achieve: to raise academic achievement, to preserve the languages, and ensure high levels of academic success. So if I was a gambler, you know, I'm not allowed to be, but if I was going to put some money on a horse, I'm going to bet on the horse that's research says is most likely to win. And I just worry why we keep betting on horses that aren't winners. And that's what worries me, that in every other area of the decisions of government, we back best evidence, best practice research, whether it's in mathematics, but somehow when it comes to language, we don't really want to know about the research on bilingual education. Maybe it's too hard, maybe it's too risky, but the consequences for us now in not looking at that, in not putting it on the table, I think are very far-reaching. So, you know, I'm pleased it's going to be on the table. I'd like to ask questions about why we haven't discussed it before and why it's so difficult to get it onto the table. You know, if it's the winning horse, we're wandering around the racetrack looking at all the other horses except the one that has the pedigree and is likely to be the winner. So it's a strange strategy for me, and I'm into backing winners, not just from the research viewpoint, but from the viewpoint of my families. So that's where I stand on it.
All right, thank you.